Hello, and welcome to the Discussioneers bonus action for episode 5. We just got back from a discussion on the Sorcerer and Warlock on Earth Arcana, which is pretty interesting, so make sure to check that out if you're watching this on the YouTubes.
Yeah.
But anyways, this is the part of the podcast where we just talk about whatever the hell we want and take your guys' questions. So, I want to, before we jump into those user-defined questions, by the way, I want to jump into something that popped in my mind right there at the end of the podcast, weirdly enough, when we were doing the announcements. But talk about how a lot of our stuff, especially how we announced that this podcast will even be going bi-weekly, and why that decision has been made, and how that benefits or doesn't benefit. I don't know what your guys' opinions are. This will be an interesting, discussion to have. But yeah, so let's talk about the bi-weekly decisions that we've been making. So a lot of it stemmed, honestly, because of personal stuff. People's jobs and whatnot conflicted, and we had to kind of condense shows, and therefore things went bi-weekly. But ever since we made that decision, honestly, I would find it a hard time to go back. I don't know about you guys, but running a game weekly, especially like D&D and stuff, is a lot of fucking work. We've all done it. Curry's done it, Bryce has done it, I've done it, and it's a lot of work. And now that we've switched to bi-weekly stuff, I have more time to prep. I can make sure that cool shit gets a lot more love than if I have a cool idea, I'm not just rushing to implement it, and maybe it doesn't turn out as cool as it could have been, and stuff like that. But what is your guys' thoughts on the bi-weekly stuff?
Yeah, Curry, how do you feel about swapping to bi-weekly?
Well,
running a game.
He doesn't run the game. He plays the games bi-weekly.
I don't know. I like bi-weekly. I like doing it every week because I really got this character with Dr. Beaver that I just fucking love playing.
True.
I wish I could do it every week, but then I got to go to the other game, and it's like, oh jeez, yeah,
work. A low-level wizard.
Yeah, so
catapult.
I don't know, light things on fire, I guess.
I will say that's like the pain is I just want to play D&D more. I would love to play every week, especially I have a lot more fun as a dungeon master than I do as a player, but
same.
Right, there's a lot of work that goes into prepping stuff, and unfortunately, at least for me, inspiration is a big part of it, and when you're playing back-to-back week after week, you're not leaving yourself a lot of time to have, something strike you, right? There's not a lot of time for inspiration to hit and be like, "Oh, shit, this could be made even better."
Sure.
With 2 weeks, you have a lot more time to, sit on and mull over what's gonna happen and, come at it from a few different angles and come up with something better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's why I love it so much. You and I have a unique, Curry right now, since obviously we have the hiatus on a drinking matter or whatnot, but Curry just plays every week, just alternates campaigns. You and I, we do things a little bit differently. Obviously, we're running, we're sharing a Saturday time slot for our shows, and we are, we'll play or player one week and then we're at DM the next week, right? In 2 different games. But honestly, I love it because I do, like you, I love dungeon mastering more than being a player, but I don't hate being a player. It's fun to do. So it's nice to, while I have that, 2 weeks rather than the 1 week crunch time to kind of prep, future sessions and whatnot, being able to have just that off week of where I just get to just play the game, and which takes a lot less fucking effort, let's be honest, to do.
No, for sure.
Yeah, it does. I like, when we did the tabletop game, I feel like it was a little bit easier because I didn't have art assets I'd have to go find.
Right. Yeah, I will say, even just myself for the for fun games that we've done, actually we streamed one of these scaled stories. It just kind of became my side thing for when Curry wasn't available. Set in our own universe still. It was I mean, I hate to I love playing virtually, but playing physically is just infinitely better than playing virtually, just without a doubt. And it's easier to run. Not even just you don't have to prep as much because you're not worrying about making all the assets and making all the dungeons so much. but as well, just like running it is easier because you're like you have that like face to face to go off of.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I
so
agree.
just Curry has it easy that he actually gets to just do it in person because it's so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just have to make the terrain by scratch,
Yeah, we
but
just yeah. Well,
But
there
that's
is
cool
that.
though. That's cool as shit. Rather than spending sometimes hundreds of dollars to get
It's-
cool art assets. Or
yeah,
art.
it's cool as shit until you realize like that one house that we built, the very first one took us probably close to like 20 hours
I believe
to
it.
build.
I believe it.
Like
Yeah.
all those tiles that we made. I mean, how long
Doing
that
this
took?
individually.
Like it took the both of us probably close to like 2 solid days of working, cutting, and painting.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work,
I believe it.
but it's rewarding because I can use those tiles every week
That's true.
because it's very theater of the mind. So
Yep.
So let's jump into our user questions. Yeah, I think you had.
First one here. I've started compiling a list. This was, I believe, in regards to when we were discussing the aberrant mind sorcerer specifically, but I feel like overall this is kind of an interesting, at least brief topic. So this is something that's hard to like really define. But can characters, or Gracious Honey asks, can characters get tools or items that interact with particular spells, like the ones that are mentioned here, such as the aberrant minds ones where they could cast spells for sorcery points for like cheaper, for free, right? I mean, this is like there's two different kind of conversations to have with this question. The first one, the perhaps easier one is I have an issue with people that don't feel comfortable. Not so much I have an issue with them, but like I dislike seeing people that aren't comfortable with tinkering with stuff. Because you can do whatever the fuck you want with a magic item. I mean, you can do whatever you want with the game because it's all make believe. We're all sitting around a table and lying to each other. But magic items can be literally anything, right? You could have a spell book that just, oh, this fighter can now cast spells if they were like a same level wizard. Like they just have all these spells. Like whatever you want to do is fine. If you wanted to come up with an item that modifies a single spell, like every time you cast Vicious Mockery, it now does cold damage or something. No reason why you'd want to do that, but you could.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. We have a new question. The answer is no. It just keeps BB and Bryce separated. So that they don't
screens,
bump into each other.
It's a barrier.
Yeah. Good Games asked. Yeah, you all have green screens. Yes, and it's that's correct. Like if I reached my hand around here, I could get to Bryce. Hey bud.
Yeah, he's...
And then if I fall back into oh no!
Immersion!
Oh no!
Immersion!
If I fall back into my chair, I will fall through a portal and land right on the back of Curry as well. Like they're all linked.
Yeah.
Yeah. But back to the original question. So, I mean, the whole point of magic items, even the ones that like Bryce said. First of all, it's most dungeon masters end up making their own. It's one of the very first and easiest things to homebrew is a magical item, because even the ones that are published in the book, they're there are just items that players have. And yeah, there might be a little bit of rules as far as attunement goes, but they just break the traditional rules. Like your class has a set of abilities or spells or whatever it may be, and then you have a magic item that gives you something more or changes something or does something that just breaks those default rules. So to answer the question, Dungeon Master could either pull one of the many existing items that kind of do that kind of stuff that's already in the Dungeon Masters Guild, or they can just handcraft their own stuff that they think is cool. The trick is just making sure everything is balanced.
And honestly, it's one of your best tools as a dungeon master to balance things. Does your party not have someone that has cure wounds or any healing? Give them an item that can do that.
Or
does your party not have anything that has like ranged spells? Give them like a circlet of blasting to like have some ranged spells or something, right? Like,
is your spellcaster in the group a warlock? Here, have the scythe.
Give them a scythe that maybe don't have them do melee kills to unlock spellcast. Just maybe they can cast more spells.
Yeah.
Or sit them aside and ask them who hurt them and why they aren't playing a wizard.
And then encourage them to play a warlock because fuck you guys.
Yep. I think that's asked and answered. Giddy Games asks, or kind of poses more, and this is a question that unfortunately I don't think that either of you are going to be any help with, but I want to touch on briefly. He said, I wonder if they'll bring some of the classes they had in 4th edition to 5th edition. want some completely fresh content. The 4E stuff had more variety in how different the classes worked, i.e., Scions, Ardents, Warlords, and Sword Mages, etc. Neither of you played 4th edition, right?
No, I've did a little bit of research though, so let me put in my 2 cents first, because you're the one who has played it, so you can shut me down when this most likely is inevitably wrong or misconstrued. But from my understanding of 4th edition is kind of to the counterpoint of your statement there, Giddy. Like in my understanding of the game is all the classes had so much. There's a spider. I killed it. Sorry, I got distracted.
Lols is angry with you.
Oh no, the drow are coming. Fuck, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so my understanding with how the classes would work is, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of options for 4th edition. Like each class had a lot of stuff that they could do mechanically. Too much, in my opinion. But because of that, or maybe as a consequence of, is eventually, as levels progressed in the 4th edition game, is every class effectively was doing the same shit, just with a different theme. Fighter still had some sort of AoE bullshit similar to like a spell and stuff like that. So I don't like that. I don't like every class should be unique and not feel the same, which is, you know, my issue with.
Yeah.
I've never played the system, but if what I've heard, that being so, is true, then that doesn't sound like a game that would be fun for me.
Yeah, we did I did like a mid-level one-off campaign in 4th edition because we wanted to play every single edition, and it was a how many times can we add +1 to our attack over and over and over again simulator. It didn't matter what class anybody was, really. It was just, are we doing this at range or are we doing this close up, but they're doing the same thing. There wasn't any difference, and it dragged so hard. So it didn't matter all that much what class you were. Every class was basically the same.
That's
so as someone that's played a decent amount of 4th edition, I will say you're not entirely wrong. The design philosophy even for 4th edition is like mechanically, I think like it's starting to become more and more accepted now that like it's less popular to hate on 4th edition, that mechanically it wasn't all awful. There's a lot of really good stuff in there that you can take, such as the minion mechanic I love and I use in my game all the time, having, you know, guys that have a single HP and are just meant to be wiped off the board basically, but they can still do normal damage. That's a 4th edition thing.
He's gone on vacation.
The slight tangent, the design philosophy was aggravating, and it was meant to be more of an MMO. It was meant to be more of like an action RPG, right? If you read the books, it doesn't talk nearly as much about role playing and interactions as the 5th edition books do. It was mostly like, here's the base stuff you need to do to like have a town and then for them to buy shit. Here's the stuff for combat. That was the majority of it. And as a consequence of that philosophy, it was a lot more like playing an MMO where every class could do more or less the same thing. You had some, no matter what you were, if you're a wizard, a fighter, a cleric, a scion, whatever, you had some sort of damage, you had some sort of AoE, you had some sort of damage mitigation or a heal, you had something to like move around enemies and stuff. Like eventually everyone got the same abilities. Everyone was a wizard of some sort, right? That was kind of the ongoing joke, was fighters had spells basically. Instead of fireball, they just did like an AoE spin or something. But flavor-wise, there was a lot of cool stuff in there. I mean, my main thing of what I would love to see them pull from is the Scion, or what they tried to do with the Mystic, of having some sort of psionic-based class. They just unfortunately, I kind of kept it a little too close to 4th edition, where they could do more or less everything. But I think we have seen, at least coming from someone who has enough experience to like kind of like see it, the subclasses we're seeing that come out are stuff being pulled from earlier editions. They're just kind of toning it down a whole lot, right? They're making it fit into this like different system, which is effectively an entirely different game. You know, because you had like the one of the examples that was given, the warlord was the fighter that was meant to call out your allies and give them like inspirations and buff your things and whatnot. And they kind of have that with the fighter, not even the fighter, but the oath of heroism, right? That kind of idea where you're just this presence on the battlefield. You're like this leader of sorts. Why have all the cams disappeared, BB?
I fixed it. Don't worry about it. I read a chat about me having a mountain behind me once, so I turned it on. I was fucking around, and I wasn't listening to a single word you said in your whole 5-minute spiel right there. And then I broke everything in the process.
Excellent,
so.
Great,
nice.
But I fixed it, so it's fine.
Anyway, so long story short is, I think they are sort of slowly trickling out similar things, but not exactly the same. I do hope, though, there's a lot of races that I hope they pull back from 4th edition. Stuff that I've already implemented myself that I just loved the flavor of, but there's a lot more stuff for them to bring out. I mean, we only have one player's handbook, and it seems like they're not just going to do a player's handbook 2, player's handbook 3 like they have before, but we have things like Xanathars and Volos and all that stuff that are adding those extra things.
I have a question. This is more so, what do you guys, tapping into your thoughts? Because I've noticed a couple of things that that similar to that point you went on. So obviously, speaking of Unearthed Arcana, which we've been reviewing, it's an old art document that came out a couple months ago, as you mentioned, I think briefly. They came out with a Mystic class, and obviously the community, if you guys haven't heard, for chat and whatnot, the community generally thought it was overpowered. It was just way too versatile. It could basically do anything. So therefore, it would make, this class could step on any other class's toes, but not only that, but it could step on everybody's toes at the same time. It's just, there was too many powerful options that it just outclassed a lot of different classes. But regardless, we never saw that be touched on. There was never another Mystic revisited or anything like that. We have with the Artificer, however. We've seen a couple of iterations now, and that just got it's being released, in the new Eberron book, which comes out I think in 2 days. Is that right? I think it comes out the 19th.
Oh, shit, I think
you're
right.
Starting on the 17th, so the Artificer will be official in literally 2 days as of this recording. So
took long enough.
Right. Like, that's crazy. But we haven't seen the Mystic at all. We've seen no revisions. We've heard, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think I remember seeing a tweet earlier this year, or maybe it's a little bit later than that, but Jeremy Crawford, one of the devs, said that they were going to be working on the Mystic and the Artificer in coming months, and all we saw was the Artificer. So do you guys think, obviously there's no way to know, none of us work at Wizards or have any affiliation, so do you guys think that they're scrapping that? Do you think we're not going to get a Mystic in 5th edition?
I can guarantee we're going to get one eventually.
You think? So you think, just despite all this,
because it's been in previous editions, I feel like without a doubt there will be some sort eventually out. I like, more specifically, maybe not an entire Mystic class, but we're already seeing things like with the Aberrant Mind. I think there will be some sort of purely psionic based something.
Because
right?
That's my thinking as well. I have a feeling the Mystic is going to get scrapped, and I think they're going to do it in favor of just subclasses that all have psionic abilities. And another reason I saw that, I don't know how familiar you guys are, but another one of the developers, Mike Merles, did a stream. It was late last year, I think, maybe earlier this year. I might be wrong on the time frame on that, but he did a stream where he was jumping on Twitch like weekly, and then just developing subclasses. And there was some interesting stuff. Obviously, a lot of it didn't even get completed all the way, but what I found interesting is some of those things he worked on stream, just this theory crafting stuff he did, was making literal, like, it was subclasses that were psionic based. I don't have a specific example in mind, but I know that there was like just straight up a wizard that was like a psionic, whatever the school of magic or whatever, what's a tradition, arcane tradition, was just psionic based. And so when he started doing that, I was thinking, like, maybe this is just another take on how they want to implement mystics, but maybe this is like the opening minds that we're seeing into the devs of the game, and them saying, doing away with the whole mystic as a full class and just going subclass only with it.
It would be kind of funny if that's how it went down, because I'm pretty sure Artificer started, at least for this iteration, started as a subclass for Wizard, and then they just made it into its own thing. Because we had the School of Invention or something like that, or no, there was literally like a School of Artifice that had
It was
that as a subclass for Wizard,
Yeah.
and then
it
they
was
just
a
put it in Artificer.
previously. Yeah, it was previous on Ars Arcana document, which that's interesting because it would be literally
Something
the
you
reverse.
Dip into.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe.
Hate that word. But that would be interesting then, because if that's the case, right, that would go from subclass to a full class, and then we're going to see a full class to subclasses. Now, obviously, we don't know. This is just me theorizing, but it's just some of the things I've seen in recent months suggest that possibly we might not get a full. And honestly, I'm sad. I get it. The design, with how simplified 5e is, there's still a lot of room for tinkering, and the subclass creation and whatnot is still wide, and there's a lot you can do with it. But making full classes is a lot harder, because you don't want to run into the same problem that the Mystic had, which the Unearthed Arcana document was that it was too much like everything else. And so my concern would be, and always has been with a Mystic, is it's just going to be a spellcaster, but it's just themed as using your brain, right? So I can't imagine how difficult that would be to make a Mystic class by itself that doesn't just feel like a spellcaster. How do you make someone with just brain powers not just feel like, oh, I'm using spell slots, or it's difficult. But
yeah,
I think that might be another reason why they might just ditch the idea of making a class entirely.
Maybe, or just, I don't know if they're gonna get rid of it entirely, but I just, it was so painful having one in like the way that they did it in our game. It was only like 10 episodes, but every time they used an ability, it was, oh man, wall of text. Now let's argue about how it works for 20 minutes, and it was such a drag.
Issue as well was, it's not like you could say clerics. If you could have an entire group of clerics and it'd be fine. You could have like the rogue cleric, the fighter cleric, the healer cleric, but you have to spec in beforehand. Oh, I'm going to be the one that does healing. I'm going to be the one that does shadows or whatever, right? For Mystic, you made any Mystic, and you could just like spend points into whatever and change on the fly, right? You didn't have to like subclass into specific things to like no matter what you subclass into, you could break something because of the manifestations.
Yeah, it was definitely. I mean, but like to Curry's point, like basically they had to make up a bunch of new rules. Like there was no spell slots with the Unearthed Arcana Mystic. It was just like psionic points, which you'd think, oh, maybe that works a lot like key points, but it doesn't, because you have all these abilities, which are their spells per se, but they had different tiers of what the spells could do and different points that you could spend to do all the shit. And it was just a lot to read. And maybe there's a way to do it so it's less wordy and more simplified, like the nature of the design, but it did seem a lot like, it seemed a step away from 5th edition when looking at the document.
It's for sure. It is much closer to, I would argue, at least to what like the 5th edition Psionic was.
Right.
And honestly, there's definitely a good Scion in there. I think they just need to hone down and be okay with it not being able to do everything.
Yeah, I mean, there's a way to make it work, and it takes a lot of effort though, and basically you have to kind of limit the options that are at hand. But so they got the baselines, I think, of something going, but like I said, in order for it to fit and not be overpowered or not step on anybody else's toes, to make it fit as just a normal character in a party and feel like any other class, it requires a lot of work on the DM's part as of now to customize the document in their own way that works, and that kind of sucks. That's why most dungeon masters don't care about that, but that's why I wish that we saw an actual updated document like we did the Artificer, like a revised, like the Artificer, its first iteration came out, and people thought the opposite. It was underpowered. There wasn't enough to it. And then they came out with a whole revision, and the whole class changed, and it was amazing. All of a sudden, it was a lot of fun. So I'm just sad we haven't seen that. You know.
I will say though, I would love to see a party entirely of mystics just tripping over each other to do the same thing.
Yeah,
no, I'm gonna pick the lock. No, I will.
No, that's awful. But so yeah, it requires a lot of noodly as is. I want to see. I love the thought of a mystic, just someone who is just, their brain is beyond limits, right? But I don't know.
Yeah. Anyways, let's try and knock out another question or two before we close out, because we already went a little over. I guess. So Giddy Games asks, if you were to make your own unique class, what would it look like? I feel like we kind of touched into it, at least for mine, going like quickly. Mine would be the Scion, would be my go-to. I want to see something that doesn't rely on spells or martial abilities, something that uses like points to do most of what it wants to get at, but it's otherwise kind of defenseless.
It's hard for me because, like, a lot of the classes in D&D right now, the ones that are out now, can easily be reflavored in many ways to kind of match a character that you're thinking of. So like I can imagine a character and not have a class in mind, right? And in my opinion, 8 or 9 times out of 10, I can find a pre-existing class or subclass that I can just reflavor, but mechanically it's the same thing and it fits that character's design. You know what I'm saying? Like you can come up with like, oh, you want to be like a samurai character, there's options for that. You want to be like a even a psionic character, you could technically just be a wizard and just or a wizard or even a sorcerer and just handcraft your spells to fit. So I don't know, for a full class it's a bit hard. I haven't really thought about it too much. The only thing I can think of is like stealing an idea, like maybe like a favorite video game character from somewhere, and have that be kind of reflavored. But even then, like a lot of the times you can just like, this fighter could also do this if you take, like, I don't know. It's, for me, I haven't really thought about making a full class. It's all about just making subclasses, because I think a subclass paired with a pre-existing class, you can pretty much do whatever you want.
I don't know. I think they just have like invisible arms, like Elfin Lade style, just go
but then
around.
We have
and
past the Astral Monk, though, or Astral Self Monk, which basically has that.
It's, that's not official yet.
Okay.
But, we talked about it a couple times in the podcast. We are developing a list of subclasses. There'll be one for each. They're all similarly toned. So stay tuned for that. But I don't know. My mindset recently has been into subclass creation, and I'm currently doing it. Bryce has helped me with it. I've had other people's opinions. Brian and Nate have helped with it. I apparently haven't asked Curry because he's not cool enough. But but the point is that's where my headspace is at. A full class, like, they're super cool, but like the other thing to keep in mind, aside of what we just mentioned, is like balancing a subclass, like creating a subclass and balancing it compared to other subclasses is a pain, but it's relatively easy, and definitely much easier when you compare it to balancing an entire class. Especially if you're trying to make a class that doesn't do, it steps outside of what pre-existing classes do. You're trying to, break that mold. You can very easily walk into being overpowered or boring, two massive extremes very quickly. And that, like, every time I've even put my mind in the direction of that kind of design, it just becomes like, that's too fucking hard right now. I don't want to spend hours doing this. But
yep. On the same vein, Giddy does also ask, is there an archetype or role you think that is missing from 5e in its official content? Which
science.
Science, I don't know if it's necessarily an archetype, right? Because you have like your healer, your tank, your damage dealer. The only one I'll say that is maybe missing is like an entire class or subclass is mobility and B, buffing. But there are subclasses that have little bits of that. Like Storm Sorcerer has ways to like buff it things. Warlocks and stuff have like a lot of classes have ways to like move and shift enemies. And there are things like Totem Barbarians that can buff characters. So
I don't know. I mean, a full class. I mean, look.
I mean, I would love to
mobility-
see like a shaman that just had like most. I think the issue is getting a player that actually wants to play a character that mostly, like helps everyone else out. But
But
Hey,
again,
come on, that's totally going to be my next cleric. Is
I was gonna say
somebody-
again, you could be a cleric who's a shaman. You can easily take a shaman, the idea of a shaman, give them the cleric class, and then just make sure you're only prepping specific spells to fit. Like that's already there. It just requires player selection and limitation. But I don't think the game is lacking. I mean, rogues are
No, for
incredibly mobile
sure.
when they can disengage with the bonus action and dash and do all sorts of crazy shit. The buffing, there's actually a lot of buffing spells you see in the cleric spell list, the druid spell list, even the paladins with their stupid auras. It just in play, a lot of players tend to favor, I don't want to be a support player, I just want to deal all the damage, so you don't see it enough, but they're there, they exist in the game. There's a lot of spells they can do.
And honestly, like, Artificer filled recently a role that I thought was kind of missing, like the technological kind of class.
The inventor,
Which yeah,
Which was neat,
basically
yeah.
that kind of where you're like either building turrets or creatures or something. I mean, honestly, something I would like to see, but I don't think would be good for D&D would be a summon class, a class that like has minions, but that's way too much math and stuff that would make combat way longer. But would still be cool to have someone that doesn't do any actual fighting themselves, but like summons creatures.
I mean,
I know there are spells
summon
that do that.
Yeah, there are.
But that's like mid to like late game that you get decent ones, right? It's like there's what's level 3, so like I guess early game you could say that's like lower tier stuff. Like someone that from like first level could like summon something.
Just play a
right?
druid and just turn into the monster. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. like there's 5th edition is pretty expansive. Like you can finagle anything to work really if you
yeah. So
move
that's
it
a
right.
tough call. That's a tough call.
So at the end
Subclass
of the day,
sneak
there
peeks.
isn't really anything missing per se.
Not really.
I don't think I'm ready for subclass sneak peeks right now. We've only done. I can tell you right now that we're halfway done. We have a first draft of 6 of the 12 classes in the player's handbook. We've taken a bit of a break. That's mostly on me, and I'm working on. So we've been doing it in player's handbook order. I don't know why, because I'm weird. So we've done bard, paladin, cleric, druid, monk, and fighter, and I think I'm missing one. I think there's only 5. Anyways, whatever the first 6 are in the player's handbook, and then so I'm working on the paladin right now. But that's all I'll say.
Here. Final question before we get out of here.
Sure. You got one for us?
Gracious Sunny asks, what happens if a character violates a vow or restriction his character might have, like a monk violating a vow of chastity or a paladin one of their vows?
Yeah. So a monk. I don't think they have a vow of chastity unless that's an RP decision. So I guess that would just come up under the
Nope.
ramifications.
Every
for
single
DM.
monk in my universe now has to have a vow of chastity. That is,
Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh no.
Yeah,
Never
so
play,
we got to
never
get
play
this
a monk.
question answered now, so I know what.
But as far as the paladins go, I mean, it's hard. I'm pretty sure in previous editions, like the paladins like had to be lawful good. So
Yep,
therefore,
that's where we talked about this briefly, I think, on actually a previous bonus section. That's where like the old stereotype of the asshole paladin comes from, because to keep their powers, they had to act within a lawful good spectrum.
Right. So you would just straight up,
Mechanically now-
if you didn't, you're not a paladin anymore because you're not lawful good.
Yep.
So therefore, you're not a paladin. You'll have to play fighter, I guess, because you're not a paladin.
So mechanically now, I don't think there's an effect really.
No, that doesn't say so in the book, but I think, well, yes and no. Defaultly in the player's handbook, there's not. But they came out, I can't remember if it was in the Dungeon Masters Guild or if it was in Xanathar's, but there is an Oathbreaker paladin now, which is in the flavor text for it is like a paladin who breaks their oath can reskin to this subclass instead, or something along those lines. Obviously that's massive paraphrasing, but It's something like that. To answer the question is just entirely up to you and the DM. There is options out there, but yeah, the one thing that comes to mind is I'm pretty sure it's called Oathbreaker Paladin, and for me, like that just seems like the go-to. Like if you break your oath, okay, now you're an Oathbreaker. You don't get your oath abilities now, because you're not, you lied, you broke your promise, but you can have these abilities instead.
Yeah. I mean, as long as I don't know how you guys would run it, but like for me, for someone to be an Oathbreaker or to like break their, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be they just did something out of their alignment or outside their oath. I think it has to be them actively being like, I'm not gonna follow this anymore. Not just them like fucking up, because that's how it could be before. Was a paladin just like fucked up and lost their powers.
Yeah.
I would have to be like, for me at least, a conscious decision. Like you as a paladin are like, I'm disavowing from my god.
While I'll agree, there is no set in stone rule for it. There's just suggestions, which in turn is a lot of what 5th edition is designed to be. It's just a bunch of suggestions, and here you go.
Yeah.
So it's just up to your dungeon master and you.
It's really up to the dungeon master. I really like the idea of somebody going up and all of a sudden, I crit. Why isn't my smite going off anymore?
So yeah, you would be the one in favor of, yes, the dungeon master can take it away, but he doesn't tell you until you find out yourself.
No, I would be doing a secret roll every single time they go to do something. I'd be doing a roll to see if it works.
That's interesting. I would actually love to see that. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, if they continue to do things that their god doesn't favor, then the DC just gets higher and higher. Secret rolls.
Yeah. So again, I mean that's a great suggestion, but that's just a dungeon master decision. It's not. There's no rules in the book for it. There's just a suggestion for the Oathbreaker Paladin. And I think that's it.
Yep.
So, is that it? Are we done?
I think so.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching the bonus action for the 5th episode of the Discussioneers. Again, we will be back next week. Our main discussion topic will be the Unearthed Arcana document discussing the Bard and the Monk. Excuse me, the Barbarian and the Monk. I spoke. And that'll be an interesting. Oh, I guess we mentioned it briefly in the main topic. I guess we'll finalize it here at the end of the bonus section. But that overpowered subclass of those two, which one do you think I was referring to, both of you?
Monk.
Yeah, Monk.
Yeah, it's the Monk. The Monk is overpowered,
yeah,
and we'll talk all about that next week. It sounds like that wasn't even a difficult guess to make. So, yeah, again, thanks for watching, everybody, and we will most definitely see you next time.